couldn't really love you anymore. You've become my ceiling. I don't think I'll.
Hi, my name is Kimberlina Vargas, and we'll be diving into the importance of the history of the National Park Service and its creation. Wildlife refuges and nature parks hold a really special place on my heart. I grew up going to nature parks here in the valley, and particularly Santa Ana Wildlife Refuge. I did an internship here my freshman year, and I was fortunate enough to see how important the conservation of our natural lands is. I was tasked with organizing land deeds of Texas and older maps dating back to the 1800s. It's interesting to consider throughout the years how the land and rivers had moved and changed ownership. They tell a very clear story of the history and development of our country. Here in the valley, we have one of the United States' greatest butterfly migratory population that come through on the way to Mexico. Also, we have a huge diversity of bird populations unique to our own climate in the world. I encourage everyone to get out and visit these nature parks close to home. We have over 9 across the valley, which always seems to surprise people. Most people are unaware that our home is full of history, adventure, and diverse animal species. In particular, we'll be discussing Yellowstone National Park, which is located in Wyoming. On March 1st, 1872, Yellowstone became the world's first national park. It was enacted by President Ulysses Grant to protect the rich heritage, wildlife, and biological systems. They sought to preserve this land for future generations. Before Yellowstone became a national park, it was home to many Native Americans for roughly 10,000 years. They lived within the means of the natural world, and it holds religious and ancestral significance for them. Yellowstone is one of the largest natural ecosystems left on our planet, and the main part of the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. It also contains nearly half of the world's active geysers and 100,000 hydrothermal sites. The park's vast historical significance encompasses 25 natural resources, various landmarks, and a registration on the Natural Register of Historical Places. As the first park enacted, a lot of mistakes took place in Yellowstone National Park, such as almost killing off all the park's natural predators, such as wolves and bears, also dwindling their bison population to extinction. Then in 1988, a fire burned nearly one-third of the park. However, recent efforts to manage the park's natural ecosystem have greatly improved Yellowstone's biodiversity.
Yellowstone's played a key role in bison conservation because there was a time period where there were no wild bison, and the last remnant animals were found in the backcountry of Yellowstone. Today, the population really is different. It's large, it's recovered so well that what we're trying to do is preserve prehistoric behaviors that shaped bison as a species. Things like migration to various low elevation winter ranges, immigration between breeding groups. We've been so successful that we have to deal with animals that want to go beyond the area that we have a responsibility to manage.
Okay, now we're going to explore the Yellowstone Historic District. Its history. So, 10 years after Yellowstone became a national park, the park experienced a lot of vandalism and mistreatment of the natural habitats. People trying to exploit the park for resources. So, there was an appointed group of people who were in charge of the park. However, they were super underfunded by the government and weren't equipped to handle the situation. That's when, in 1886, Yellowstone asked the U.S. Army for help, and several companies of men came into the park to manage it. They would be there for 32 years until 1918. So the structures that we see at the park are the structures left behind by the U.S. Army. Now the park uses them as housing for the park staff. However, you can take a tour of the remnants of the old fort. The most soldiers the park saw were 324, which did not include the ones that brought their families and the employees that already worked for the park. Children attended school at the park, men would go to the gym, they would order household items from the postal exchange, and they would enjoy the outdoors snow sports. Many soldiers enjoyed this duty station due to the beautiful environment and lots of activities. However, there was a report that 67 men fell into deliria from being isolated in the Yellowstone Mountains, away from civilization. Eventually, in 1916, Congress created the National Park Service, and the Army turned over the authority over to them in 1918. Without the help of the United States Army, Yellowstone couldn't have been what it is today. And thanks to them and appreciate their efforts. Okay, now we're going to be talking about the flight of the Nez Perce tribe. Roughly 5 years after Yellowstone became a national park in 1877, the Nez Perce tribe left their homelands in Oregon and Idaho and moved towards Wyoming, and through Yellowstone on their way to Canada. They were being pursued by the U.S. Army. The group included 800 men and women and children, plus their 2,000 horses. The U.S. government sought to move them to a reservation in order to give their land to the settlers who were coming from the east. Before they could even enter into the Yellowstone territory, a huge battle ensued and killed many of the people, including women and children, in the Battle of Big Hole in Montana. Later, the remaining survivors entered into the national park on August 23, 1877. The Nez Perce people still remember the horrors that ensued in this time. They spent 13 days in the Yellowstone National Park trying to escape the U.S. Army. During this time, the Nez Perce people would encounter 25 visitors who they took hostage and attacked, eventually killing 2 of them. The group continued into Montana, however. The Army stopped them 40 miles from the Canadian border. This is where a fight would ensue once again, killing many, until they surrendered, and their chief, Joseph, said, "From where the sun now stands, I will fight no more forever." The remainder of the survivors would be sent to a reservation in Oklahoma, but they still remember this tragedy, and it is still talked about today. To commemorate the loss of these people, the National Historic Park established 38 sites throughout Idaho, Montana, Oregon, and Washington to honor the history of the Nez Perce tribe. There is a 1,170-mile trail that was established in 1886 for the historic remembrance, and it is considered a sacred place to them to honor their ancestors and carry their memories. Aside from the Nez Perce tribe, there are 27 other Native American tribes that are associated with the Yellowstone National Park. It holds a lot of history even before our country was established from people who were here for thousands of years. They honored them and respect them with dedications and tribal ceremonies. You can learn more about the ways they honor the Native Americans on their website at the National Park Service, Yellowstone. These are just a portion of the different acts that were enacted in Yellowstone throughout the years in different controversy movements the United States had put in place to preserve the natural life of the park. As you can see through the animal species being eradicated and then coming back, certainly the National Park Service had a lot of trials and errors and is still adapting to new techniques and resources to try to coexist with the natural world so that we can enjoy it for many years to come. Those conservation movements would have not been able to occur if it weren't for these laws that the United States had put in place and the different organizations that were created for those purposes. It shows how history is always adapting and changing and trying to move forward towards a better world. Attending is a vital part of keeping these parks funded and able to continue their mission to protect the unique biodiversity of every state. So I plead with everyone to support their National Park Service and their local parks. You can find a lot of good resources at the National Park Service website. They go into depth with every park they manage and in every state. And all the information that we have shared today was gathered through the National Park Service website under the Yellowstone National Park tabs. You can also read more about the history of the native tribes that are still present there today. And you can visit their webpage on more current park projects and get involved with the natural world around you. Thank you, and have a good day. So take the Yellowstone Pledge. Give wilderness room, use a Zoom. Follow the beaten path. Be bear aware. Watch out for water. Practice safe selfies. Enjoy the ride. Leave your drone at home. Clean, drain, dry. Stash your trash. And leave what you find.